everyone, my name is Chloe and welcome to another day of Favorites Week. So I could not think of a list of 24 books, of my 24 favorites in 24, or my top anything. I could have done maybe like a top 50, but I don't think you guys want to sit here for that. So instead what I did is every day this week, I am releasing a different video of my favorite genre, like genre breakdowns, my favorite books that I read in 2024. So these are books that I read in 2024, not necessarily ones that came out in 2024, though some of them are. So let's just get into it. Today is going to be romance/women's fiction with like a bonus one, because this is kind of the catch-all day where I like couldn't necessarily fit it into any of the other categories. So here we are. So it is a top 10 plus one. So we have Emergency Contact by Lauren Lane. So I read this at the beginning of the year and still remember it. This is about a divorced couple that, so she is in an accident. She's in the hospital and he gets a phone call that says, hey, like your ex-wife's in the hospital and you're her emergency contact. She can't go to sleep. She can't be alone. Can you come get her? So he does. And it's kind of a grumpy sunshine because she's kind of grumpy and socially awkward and he's just Mr. Sunshine, and they are divorced and they are completely opposite, but it's Christmas time. And so he's like, well, come on home to Chicago with me or whatever. And so he takes her back to his family's house or whatever, and their trip there, of course, there's a lot of hijinks. We get to see a lot of the relationship dynamics both then and now, and I fell in love with them as a couple. I loved them and was totally rooting for them. This would have been a 5-star for me if it wasn't for one thing. He is about to get engaged to somebody else, and his fiance is trying to go home with him and is meeting him in Chicago or wherever his family is, and yet he's kind of reconvening these things with his ex-wife. Now, there's no physical stuff that I remember, but that part needed to be changed. Otherwise, this would have been a 5-star. Then we have The Second Chance Here by Melissa Weisner. So this is about a woman who is just kind of down on her luck. She's living on her brother's best friend's couch, and she's been fired. She's been broken up with, all the things, because she's too much. She's too abrasive. She's too loud. She's all these things. And so she's at a New Year's Eve party, and she's like, I wish I could redo this last year. So she wakes up the next day, and she's redoing the last year. And so she decides to take a different approach and be a little more subtle, a little more submissive. And the book follows what would have happened if she would have lived that way. And I love that idea. I love that trope of like what would have been, or does it matter how we act or what we do, and how does it change things? And the whole like everything happens for a reason, and also being authentic and who you are, and standing up for yourself and not taking stuff just because it pleases other people. And I loved this book. I read it right after I read the Ready or Not by Cara Bastone, and I really liked that one too. That was a brother's best friend romance with a woman who she finds herself accidentally pregnant, and it follows her throughout the pregnancy, and her brother's best friend is kind of the guy there for her. I loved that book too. I didn't intend to put it on this list, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think it needs to be on this list. Then we have The Trail of Lost Hearts by Tracy Garvis Graves. So this is about a woman who loses her fiance. He dies, and she's just lost. And so she goes and decides to start geocaching. And she goes to Oregon. She's in Oregon geocaching. She's in a dangerous situation, and another guy comes to help her. And he is also a lost soul. He lost somebody important to him. He's a hurting heart. And together they help each other heal. And gosh, it was such a sweet romance, like such a sweet relationship, and such a, like, it's just such a heavy load they were both carrying, and the way they like cared for each other through it was wonderful. They decided to start geocaching together, and it's in no way like a insta-love thing. They are staying in separate rooms. They're just kind of being there for safety's sake, and slowly things start to unravel, and it's just so good. Then we have Flirting with 40 by Jane Porter. So this is one that I've had on my shelf forever, and I may be the only one that loves it, but it is about this woman who she's newly divorced. It's the holidays, and she's, things are different. Her kids are now going to be with her husband. She's about to turn 40, and her best friend is like, hey, let's go to Hawaii. Let's just the week the kids are with your husband, let's go to Hawaii. So she's reluctantly like, fine, okay, let's do it. And she goes, and her best friend's husband gets really sick, so she can't go on the trip. So she goes solo on this trip to Hawaii and meets a surf instructor there and kind of has a fling. But it's just about her, again, finding herself and coming to terms with the new normal and coming to terms with her 40-year-old self. And I'm not 40 yet, but I'm 35 and feeling the effects of aging, and yet still like not being just a fuddy-dud because you're getting older. Like I loved it. Then we have Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. So this is total opposite. While Flirting with 40, I may be the only one that loves it. Just for the Summer, everybody and their mother loves it, and with very good reason. This is about a traveling nurse who has a lot of baggage. Her mom was awful, and so now her and her best friend, who's like her sister, they are traveling nurses that move stations every so often. And she meets this guy because they meet on a Reddit thread because they both have this curse where every time they date somebody, they break up and then that person goes on to find their soulmate. And so they're like, oh, hey, me too. So it's about time for her to move. So she moves to Minnesota or something, wherever he is. And the two have a friendship relationship that is, again, just so good. He is he's like responsible for his younger siblings because his mom did something she was not supposed to. And so she's serving some time, and she is running from her past. And it's the sweetest thing. It's the sweetest thing. Highly recommend. I have read all of that, like Part of Your World or whatever universe by Abby Jimenez. And I think, gosh, I don't know. This one might be my favorite. Number 2 and 3 are both my favorite. Then we have The Summer of Yes by Courtney Walsh. So this is about a woman who wakes up. She's kind of a workaholic, all the things. She wakes up in the hospital, and she re-examines her life. She's sharing a room with this older lady who is also a workaholic and where she's at in life. And she decides to take the Summer of Yes, where she does not say no to anything. She's not as kind of constrained by all the shoulds and the rigidity of her life. And she decides to take this Summer of Yes. And she wants this older lady to come with her. And it is so sweet, so fun. I highly recommend. Then we have With Love from London by Sarah Geo. So this is about a woman who, her mom and her were kind of estranged, and she gets a letter one day that her mom has died and left her a bookshop in London. And so she has to go figure out what to do with this bookstore. So we go there, and this book has such a love of books and reading that I love those books. I love those books wholeheartedly. And she gets involved in the little community, but more so we get both perspectives of her mother as a young person and her, and knowing that we never really know our parents, that our parents had a whole life before us and we weren't a part of it. And so having some empathy for parenting mistakes that they made, because we're all just trying to do our darn best. And there is a little romance in this, but I would definitely say it's more women's fiction. Then we have Out of the Clear Blue Sky by Kristen Higgins. So this follows two women who are kind of unlikely friends because one is divorced and the other is kind of his mistress. And our main character, she is just awful to her ex-husband, but in a way that's so funny. Like, she's so petty. But she is a midwife, and she's like otherwise this really great gal. And our other main character, I think her name's Melissa, the mistress. We don't like her, but I love the friendship that forms between the two of them, kind of the feminist vibes of this, and the reflection on motherhood and how darn bittersweet it is. There were so many times in this book that I was like, gosh, yes, I feel that to my core, that them growing up is the best thing, but also the hardest thing. And how fast it goes and all of that. I really enjoyed this book. Again, more of a women's fiction. Then we have The Words We Lost by Nicole Deese. So this is about a woman who's going back because her best friend has died. And her best friend was a very prolific, well-known author, and she's going in search of the manuscript for the last book in a very popular series. Kind of like, I think it's like a fantasy series, like the Dragon one by Rebecca Yarros. Goodness. So she goes back to try to find this manuscript and work with the best friend's cousin, who they had a little romance as teenagers and now have not spoken to each other. And they're kind of teaming up to find this manuscript. And it was very good, very emotional, but also really sweet. Then we have a heavy-hitting one, like Dandelion Dust by Karen Kingsbury. And so this is about a couple who is raising their adopted son. He's 4 or 5 years old, and the biological mom, willingly signed over rights, and then dad was in jail, etc. Dad gets out of jail and wants his son, and they thought the whole adoption was above board, and come to find out it wasn't, and so they have to decide, what do they do? I mean, they've raised this baby since he was a baby, and now he's 5, and they, of course, are in love with him. That's their son. And so, do you keep it above board, or do you run to protect your son? And it was so tense and so emotional, and very faith-filled. You guys will notice that I have not done Christian fiction, and that's because I didn't really categorize any Christian fiction this year. I did it based on like the more dominant genre. So this one I would definitely say is Christian fiction, women's fiction. There's that. So those are the top 10. Now, the bonus is the Restoration series by Terry Blackstock. This is a 4-book series about, it's a dystopian, so it's, I mean, you could call it women's fiction because it's about a family who the world stops, and like cars stop in the middle of the road, all electricity is out, water's out, everything, and it's in present times, and everybody is stripped back to primitive basics of having to grow your own food and all the things, and it was really interesting to think about. Really, really interesting. I loved all 4 books and would highly recommend. So it wouldn't really fit anywhere else. So here it is. So that is my top 10, 12, whatever, romance women's fiction. If you need to know more, like which ones are romance and which ones are women's fiction, I feel like it's a fine line, but I would be happy to answer those in the comments below. Let me know what were some of your favorites from this year, and that's it. Thank you so much for watching Favorites Week. It's been a great time. I will be here later this week with like trying a book bracket style, trying to figure out my one favorite book for the year. So, because I have no idea, I have no way of picking. So we're gonna do it bracket style. I'll see you later this week for that video, and we'll talk to you later.